Hey HTDA, and yesterday I actually released a video on the endgame of Outworld Station that mentioned a couple of things that were on the roadmap that I said, well, the game really slows down around this point and we'll need to wait for some of these updates to make that a little bit more easy to manage. What I didn't know was that within hours of that video going live, some of those updates would actually be implemented. So here's a short overview of everything that's changed in the last update. So let's start with the most important change in this update, at least in my opinion. That's the fact that you can now upgrade your Mark II miners to Mark III miners. I already mentioned this in my video yesterday, but this is the main bottleneck in the end game. You simply do not have enough raw resources to build everything at a reasonable speed, at least what I consider to be reasonable. So with upgrading all your miners to Mark III, you're going to get a 50% increase in the amount of raw resource you have available. Is it going to fix all the speed problems? Not really, but it's definitely going to help a lot. You can see right now the Mark II miner is producing at 288. This is with some upgrades. But if you upgrade this to Mark III, it will shoot up to something like 430. There you go. It's another 50% upgrade compared to the Mark II one. It says 1 plus 100%, but that is on top of the base speed. So you already had 100% from the Mark II, and now it's up to 300% total from the Mark III one. So 430-ish. Now keep in mind though that in order to make sure this can actually reach your facilities, if you're using a single production line like I'm doing here, you will actually bottleneck yourself by simply having these storage units in place that cap the output. The solution for that is also already in the game, because you can now also upgrade your storage units to Mark III. If you do that, the throughput speeds up to 480, which nicely correlates with the maximum amount that a miner completely upgraded can produce. So no problem there anymore whatsoever. That said, keep in mind that your production facilities still only have a maximum throughput of 240 per minute. Even if you upgrade your smelters to Mark II, as you can see, the maximum output stays at 240 per minute, so you don't want to have all your production units in a single line if you're belting them on a Mark III miner. This is a Mark II miner, but the same principle still applies. What you want to do is make sure you have several production lines hooking up to this output. That also means that you don't get into any trouble with the throughput on the belts themselves, or the connectors, I mean, because you will have basically 3 production lines all benefiting from 1/3 of the miner. And as you can see, the directional arrows kind of take that into consideration as well. So rather than having 400 units of production on a single line, you will have about 150 on every single line, and that should be very easy to well, work at full capacity. You can see I'm doing the same thing with the wormhole here as well. You can see the wormhole connecting on 3 sides with my output, thereby making sure that I don't run into any bottlenecks along the way. Speaking of bottlenecks, a couple of changes also happened to fluids. For example, you can now have a total of 300 output in a single pipeline. It used to be 240, so that's quite a significant upgrade compared to how it was before. You can just fit in more stuff on a single pipeline, basically. On top of that, the cloud miners now actually tell you how much they are producing per minute. This was one of the glaring omissions in the previous builds, and this will just make your life a lot easier, because now you actually know how many of those power stations you can fit on a single belt, because A, you know how much you're producing, and B, you know how much you're consuming. We already knew how much you were consuming, and my guess of about 4 of those power stations per cloud miner turns out to be pretty accurate, but still, it's nice to now know for sure how much you're producing. Another very welcome change is that you can now much easier set your in and output settings in the advanced mode. So before, you had to kind of manually go through every single slot in your inventory and set whatever you want to go there. You can still do that now, but you can also just Control C, Control V, and just paste it like you should always have been able to do, basically. And again, it's a early access game for the moment still, so I don't blame the developers for anything, but this is a very, very nice quality of life upgrade. And speaking about customizing your outputs, or at least your slots, you can also do that with the output of machines now. By default, before, the machines all used to produce up to the maximum you could fit in a single slot, which was kind of useless, because what I was trying to do initially wasn't limiting the storage, but if all your buildings also produce the maximum amount, that kind of defeats the purpose. However, you can now use this button below to set it to a couple of different preset settings. But for example, you could say, well, never stock up more than 5 times the recipe, and this will make sure that you don't have 250s sitting here waiting to be used, but you actually only have 5, for example, in the case of this small cargo pod. There are also some quality of life changes in terms of the consumption of some of the resources. The small fuel tank, and I am trying to figure out where I'm producing those over here, now consume a little bit less of the nanoplating. Now, you probably have heard me complain about 5 billion times during the last couple of episodes on how much plates you need for anything. I still think you need too much plating for pretty much everything, but that being said, with all the additional resources that you have now, and the fact that they tweaked some of the recipes at least a little bit downwards, again, that should just make your life easier. Another nice feature that I think a lot of you might appreciate is the fact that you can now pause the game and build whatever you want, including things like deleting your buildings if you don't feel like you've done a good job at that. That means that you can set up defenses while there is a meteor storm incoming before, for example, and there might be some other use cases for that as well. Now, typically I would recommend that you build while not being paused because everything else will be producing in the background, but it is an option you now have that you didn't have before. Another thing to note is that if you're anything like me, you might have seen this problem occurring quite a few times where the tugs are kind of just getting stuck in how they function. Now, there is in the patch note and in the remark that they upgraded the functionality of the tugs, so they should be a little bit smarter. Hopefully this doesn't happen. This is from a loaded game, so these tugs were already stacked up before the patch was implemented. But hopefully that will now occur a little bit less, so all in all you don't need to build quite as many tugs anymore to make sure things actually keep moving. There has been quite a few other smaller changes that you can read about in the patch notes. I'll link to that in the description. But the last thing I want to mention is the fact that you can now change your hotkeys. So you have this little bar on the back if you don't have any menu selected. That gives you easy access to a lot of different things. But you can now set that to whatever else you want. So let's say I want to build wormholes very quickly. I can just press Ctrl 9 or whatever. And then if I go back to the default, you can now see the wormhole has been added to this bar. So you can either access it very easily from there, or you can just press button 9. And then you can build as many of these as you want. And you have very easy access to everything, which makes it a lot easier to set up new bases like that. Now, again, I want a blueprint function, don't get me wrong. But all of this definitely helps making the game more convenient and easy to play. And again, it's still in early access, so don't be too hard on the developers if something that you want is not in the game yet. I would actually highly recommend that you go over to their Discord and you let them know whatever you're missing or that you want to be prioritized, because they are very reactive, I've noticed on the Discord, and they're obviously actively working on the game, so don't expect anything that you ask for it to be implemented the day after or anything like that, but let them know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, so they can take that on board and make those changes to the game if enough people feel the same. Either way, I hope you found this useful. The game is definitely still improving for the better, and I hope you have a lot of fun playing this. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.